kind of your cord. There's so many cords attached to me right now that I just need it to be. I'm terrified of stepping on it and ripping it out and destroying the sound stuff that we spent money on. It just stresses me out a little bit sometimes, I'm not going to lie. There's just a lot of cords attached to me.
3, 2, 1, bro.
What's up, everybody? My name is Nick Murphy. I'm one half of the Brothers Murph, and this is Metagame Minute. Metagame Minute is a weekly segment where Mike or I talk about anything we want to talk about in the gaming world today. And today, I want to talk about simple games that are hard to teach. This is kind of one of those things that's kind of tough because for me, it's hard to think of these games until I'm like in the moment where I'm just like, oh, I can't teach this very well. And I don't know why. It's not that difficult, but I have a hard time teaching it. And it's weirdly complicated, and that's kind of how I feel about it. I was talking about a game that I'll bring up in a second, and I was like, this game is not that complicated, but I find it to be incredibly hard to teach, even though it's kind of a simple game. And so I kind of want to talk about that and get all y'all's inputs on like, what's a game that you think that is pretty simple, but for whatever reason is hard to teach? So the first game I'm going to talk about is Libertalia. Libertalia is a really cool pirate-themed game where you are running a pirate ship and you have all these different roles. There are like 30 different roles, and you basically playing one simultaneously as everyone else face down, and then everyone reveals their roles, and then depending on the rank of the role, certain roles are ranked higher. If you're just like, the kid mopping up the poop deck, you're pretty low ranked, but if you're the captain, you're like the highest ranked. And then they get ranked in terms of the boat, and then you get booty and you get treasure and stuff like that based off of your rank. So it's pretty simple. That's all you're doing. The problem is there's like 30 different roles. So even though they're all, in my opinion, very straightforward roles, they kind of activate at different times. They either activate during the day phase, or they activate during the evening phase, or the night phase. And because of those three things, it just gets confusing. Now, one thing that's nice about it is you're not playing with all 30 roles at once. You're only playing with a certain kind of subset of them that's chosen randomly, but everyone has the same roles. It's not like I have some roles, Mike has some other roles, Jenny has some other roles. No, everyone has the same. So you really only have to explain all the roles once, but it's a really simple game that ends up being really hard to teach because with that many rules, it just starts getting confusing for new people. And I always want to bring this game out with like newer gamers because I think on a complexity level, it's just fine for newer people. But because of all the different roles, it just makes it difficult to teach and difficult to have it run kind of smoothly. You kind of have to know the game and just understand what all the symbology means, even though there's not a ton of it. And that way it can start really running quickly and smoothly. But it's probably going to take a game or two of that. And I just never really want to get through those first couple games or two, and which is a little bit too bad because I really, really love Libertalia, but it's a little bit hard to teach. Something with a similar problem of just a lot of stuff to explain is Sorcerer City. I really like Sorcerer City. I have cooled on it a little bit. We talked about it in our top 10 games we've cooled on, but nonetheless, I have cooled on it, but I still really like it. But one of my problems with it is the fact that despite the fact that it's pretty simple in the fact that you're laying out tiles, you want to match colors to colors, makes sense. There are some monsters coming in. Okay, cool. You're buying new tiles. Okay, cool. But there are just so many different like phases to this game that it just makes it difficult to teach. And you can kind of teach as you go. You can kind of play through a round and kind of teach each phase as you get to it. But for me, at least, maybe it's just the way I teach it. It just never seems to work very well like that, despite the fact that I like games that you can kind of teach as you go. And this one, just for whatever reason, doesn't really work that way. And then on top of that, you constantly are having monsters that come into your deck each round. You get a new monster. And on top of that, you're buying new tiles, which sometimes will do different stuff. And so when you're in the middle of the real time, putting out tiles, trying to do it quickly, and people all of a sudden have questions about it, and all of a sudden you're like, the monster does this. You have to put it over here, and then it negates. Okay, cool. And then you have to go back to this, and it just never really works very well. Despite the fact that the game is very simple and honestly not that complex, it just makes it hard to teach and hard to flow well because, again, there's just kind of a lot of little stuff. Now, those are two similar examples, but one that's kind of different is Remember Our Trip. I really like this game, but this game is difficult to teach because it's just so different than like any other game that I've played. This is a game where you all we're on this same trip and you're trying to remember the trip and you're trying to put out these polygonal tiles and you have similar memories but different memories. It's really hard to describe because this game is, I can honest to God say, unlike any game I've ever played in my entire life. And again, it's not that complicated, but because it is so different and it is so out there in the terms of the way it plays, which is a great thing. This is one of my favorite things about it, is the fact that it's so unique, it's so different, and it's a really good game. But it just makes it so it's like even me trying to describe it, I'm like, you're like, we're all on the same trip, but you remember stuff differently. So you're trying to have like your memories solidify before other people's memories and all this stuff. And that doesn't make any sense. And just it's very, very odd. And it makes it kind of difficult to teach because it has no reference points. You can't be like, oh, you know, this game, it's kind of like that. With Remember Our Trip, there's none of that. It is completely different. And that kind of makes it relatively difficult to teach despite the fact that it's a pretty simple game in the end. But Remember Our Trip is really, really good. Give it a shot. It's really weird in a good way, and it's super, super fun. So those are just 3 quick examples that I could think of off the top of my head that are easy to play games that are kind of hard to teach. And I'm sure there's a lot more. So down in the comments below, let me know games that you struggle teaching despite the fact that they're relatively simple, or games that are relatively simple but people struggle learning. Because again, I think knowing these kinds of games and knowing good ways to teach them or just discussing them makes it easier for all of us to learn them and teach them because it's just understood that like, hey, this is simple but kind of weird. And so down in the comments below, let me know those games. And until next time, my name's been Nick Murphy. We'll see you later. And remember, the more meta, the more better. Thank you so much for watching that video. My name is Nick Murphy. I keep saying my name in the end part here. I don't really know why, but nonetheless, check out that Metagame Minute. It's Mike's Metagame Minute from last week, and that video right there is something. I don't know, YouTube's gonna decide that one for you. Trust the robots or don't. Probably don't. They're gonna steal your kidneys. Also subscribe.